and welcome. You're watching NewsX Influencer A-List. My name is Megha Sharma, and today's episode we have with us Raj Shamani, who is a motivational speaker and an entrepreneur, Sharan Hegde, who is a stock market expert, and then there is Celine Kwese, who is the youngest stock financial influencer. Take a look at today's lineup.
A motivational speaker and entrepreneur.
I started that particular thing not just in front of my friends. I started going to colleges and then cities and giving small interviews like this.
His mission is to help people become key opinion leaders.
Because I see it as race and I want to do it all. I just want to do it all. I want to be everywhere. I want to prove my worth everyone.
NewsX Influencer A-List proudly recognizes Raj Shamani for influence in motivational speech and business leadership.
Hello and welcome. You're joining us on this very special interview as part of our NewsX Influencer A-List series. Now with us today is somebody who started motivational speaking at the age of 16. He's 24 now. He has had more than 200 plus speeches in over 26 countries. And he is, of course, here with us on the show, Raj Shamani. Raj, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you on NewsX.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm just astounded with the warm welcome you have given me. Thanks.
All right. So, Raj, let's start and let's discuss your hustle, because you were just telling us that, you're 24, overworked. Tell us, Raj, so you were 16 when you started the entire, motivational speaking shenanigan, if I may say so. Now 16-year-olds are looking for advice themselves. How did you start motivational speaking at that age?
Oh, so I started business, at the age of 16 itself. So my business started working. And just because all my friends were asking me that, oh, how did you start the business at this age and how are you making it work? I started giving them advices. I started telling them what was I doing right? What was I doing wrong? And that picked up pretty well. So I started that particular thing not just in front of my friends. I started going to colleges and then cities and giving small interviews like this, because I just wanted to do it because I was enjoying. And the only thing is, I think I did the No, I think the only thing I did was I fulfilled the supply and demand gap. Nobody wanted to at that time go to YouTube and learn all this stuff. I was going to learn and then talking to my friends in a way which is fun.
All right. So not just universities, but from what we understand, you've spoken at the TEDx, and you've spoken at the UN, and name it and you've done it. What is the one thing that has stuck with you, Raj?
One thing, the only thing which is stuck with me is I see this entire thing as a race. Okay. I'm not like a monk person. I don't think that we all are having our own races. I'm a very realistic person. So I see all of this as race. So I want to win it. And that's the only thing which has taken me from a small city to the top colleges of the world, to Harvard, to Babson, to United Nations, to all of these places, because I see it as race and I want to do it all. I just want to do it all. I want to be everywhere. I want to prove my worth everyone.
All right, that's fair, because you, in a sense, are, of course, one of the internet's favorite motivational speakers. So, Raj, it is only going to be fair to ask you this next question. When it comes to digital motivational speaking or reaching out to your audience via the digital platform, there are multiple things that change, because you can't see your audience, because being physically present on a stage and the warmth that you get, the kind of reaction that you get is very different. Digital content creation is completely different. So how exactly is it that you cope with that? And, how did your journey transpire?
It's not that difficult if you understand, okay? It's the whole game is about setting the context. Content is easy. Correct. The setting the context that's what you're talking about. So what I did, when I started, I had a team of 2 people. There was one videographer and the manager, okay? Now I have a team of 9 people. So when I started that, I bought that board. If you can see it back right here, I bought that board. Correct. I took it, I put that board in front of me, and then I made 2 of my employees sit right in front of me, my team members. And I would talk to them and we'll record it from the different angles. So I was as if the entire video looked as if I'm talking to other person, because that's what I was doing. Yeah. So on the videos also, I try to give a feel that I am talking to someone. So now listen to it because I'm talking to you. And that is what I did. And it started with 2 people. Now there are 9 people in front of me. I give them speeches. So for me, it's pretty much same. Only the number of people have reduced. Earlier on stages, it was in 500, 600 people. Now there are 5 or 6 people. But it's
All
kind of
right,
same.
that's fair. That's fair. And of course, you're reaching out to a much larger audience, which I'm sure is great.
I hate
Raj,
camera,
so-
but most of the people don't know this.
And yet here we are. So clearly you're doing something right. Before we let you go, there's one thing that we want to know from you. COVID has, of course, affected all of us very deeply in an emotional sense as well, correct? Because it's not just the locked up in the home physically, but also emotionally. There's just a collective trauma that we're all going through. Now, in times like this, a lot of people are struggling to find the motivation to, keep going ahead and keep doing daily tasks as well. In a time like this, Raj, how is it that you managed to create motivational content? Was it difficult? Did you change anything? What was it like?
It's not that difficult. The only thing is, I think we all are pretty comfortable in our houses. The only thing is leaving that comfort and doing something uncomfortable at the time when everything is just working out well for us. Even though it has been difficult when we are at home, but at the end of the day, we are comfortable in our beds, right? So the main thing is we don't find motivation that to get out of the bed and do something. And for that, I think we all know what to do. We all have an idea of how we can change our lives or how we can make it better. The thing is, we just need daily reminders. And I try to do that with other people. So that's the only motivation I have, that if I am not reminding someone else, then they are not improving their life. So Raj, you better get up and remind them that they need to do this.
All right,
Just like a
Raj, thank you so much for being here. And you, of course, are taking on this responsibility very, 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 very well, and clearly helping everybody out there. Thank you so much, Raj, for being with us on NewsX. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, and more power to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this.
With the goal of inculcating financial freedom.
I also put a lot of humor into my content delivery so that it's easy and fun to watch for people from all backgrounds.
He's simplifying all things finance, from stocks to mutual funds.
Having these sort of collaborations with trusted brands in our country, that sort of helps me also, it validates in the eyes of my audience that I'm also giving out, valid and truthful.
NewsX influencer A-List proudly recognizes
Sharan Hegde for influence in financial management.
Hello and welcome. You're joining us on NewsX Influencer A-List. I'm Parati Bhanot, and with us on the broadcast today is Sharan. Now, on Instagram, he's known as Finance with Sharan. He's out there giving financial advice. So if you don't know how to handle your money or how to manage personal finances, Sharan is the person to go to on the internet. Sharan, firstly, thank you so much for being with us on NewsX Influencer A-List, and a very warm welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Pariti. Nice to be here.
So, Sharan, can you start by telling us a little about what is it that you do on the internet? What is the kind of financial advice that you give out to people?
Sure. So the kind of financial advice that I give out is something that all of us should know regardless of what we do. Because when the first thing that people think about when we hear finance is, CAs. And then we think that, all the work that is related to finance, money management is something that a CA does and not us. But that's a real shame, because there are so many things that we can take control by ourselves. And when we do things by ourselves, that's when we give the utmost importance and utmost care in growing our money. So the kind of content I talk about ranges from investing in mutual funds, taxation, cryptocurrencies, real estate, insurance. So all the important things which all of us should know regardless of our background. And I try to condense all of this important information into small bite-sized 30-second form of content. So that it is easy to understand. And I also put a lot of humor into my content delivery so that it's easy and fun to watch for people from all backgrounds and age.
So, when we talk about finances, right, you obviously want advice that you can trust, right? And on the internet, there's a lot of misinformation also that floats. It's difficult to trust everything that you consume, right? How do you kind of bridge that gap? How do you make your audience trust what the information that you're giving out. Where does that credibility aspect come in?
Right. So credibility is something that takes time to build, like any brand or any personal brand that is starting from scratch. It takes time and consistency and engagement with your audience to build that credibility. So for me, two things helped out. One is constantly engaging with my audience, not just after delivering my content. I also engage with my audience when they ask me the questions, either on the comment section or in the DMs. So that continuous engagement and clarifying their doubts builds in that trust in the audience. So that's number one. Number two is associating yourself with brands which are already trusted. So I have done live sessions with the CEO of Paytm Money. I've done live session with the strategy head of Policy Bazaar. So by having these sort of collaborations with trusted brands in our country, that sort of helps me also, it validates in the eyes of my audience that I'm also giving out, valid and truthful content. So these are the two things which help me.
And your background also must help, right? Because you work, you have a full-time day job, and you're also a financial consultant there. So kind of bringing that onto the digital space, I'm sure that has an advantage by itself also.
Absolutely. So I in my day job, I work as a management consultant for a consulting firm called PwC. So here I work with the Fortune 100 clients based out of the US on their growth and strategy projects on finance and operation strategy. So this sort of obviously also helps me in building that credibility factor. And it's also about cross-platform presence. So a lot of people come through on LinkedIn as well, and they on LinkedIn they know exactly the kind of work that I do. So when they flow from LinkedIn to my page, they know that I've already achieved all of these things, and so that's how it makes them very easy for them to follow my advice.
So where did you see the vacuum, Sharan? Sorry for cutting you off, but where was the vacuum? That you identified and said that now I want to be talking about finance on the internet. I want to be a digital content creator. What was it that you saw that kind of made you realize that this is something that needs to be done?
Right. So for me, the first thing, like for most of us, is understanding the people's perceptions in your surroundings and your immediate vicinity. So for me, what I realized that even amongst my immediate friend circle, there was an alarmingly large number of people who had no idea about what to do with their money after it hits their bank account. And these are people who are well educated and they're earning a lot of money. So that is number one. Number two, what I've realized is that the content that is currently there on the internet, it's coming in two forms. Either it's through content creators on YouTube. I'm talking about finance related knowledge here. It's either through content creators on YouTube or through articles which are written by companies. Now, articles written by companies, people don't like to read these days, and they're also very difficult to understand. Now, content created on YouTube, the problem is YouTube is a search engine at the end of the day. So people have to actively type for that particular content to understand what that is. And if you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to find that particular piece of content. So these are the two realizations that I had. And based on these, I realized I decided, let me put content on Instagram, because Instagram as a platform is so unique because it doesn't really expect you to type something. The content comes on your feed automatically, whether you ask for it or not. So if your content goes viral and if it's actually adding value to the people, it'll go to a large number of people. So this is the gap that I found and how I interested.
So what is the age group that you generally feel reaches out to you the most? Are these young people like me, for instance? Is this the age group that seeks advice on financial matters and managing personal finances? What is the age group like?
Right. So the age group is primarily 18 to 35. So that is the major age group. That's because my platform is mostly on Instagram. That's where I put most of my content. And Instagram, by nature of the app, it doesn't appeal to people who are above 40 years old. So about 50 to 60% of my audience are in the age group of 18 to 35 itself.
Okay. And how often do you give, let's say, updates? Because as far as finances are concerned, as far as tax laws, for instance, are concerned, mutual funds are concerned, there are constant updates that keep coming in, right? Policies change. Policies are constantly evolving. So is that also something that you keep track of and maybe explain to your audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So keeping track of the evolving nature of rules in investing and in finance is very important, because you don't want to be explaining outdated stuff to your audience. And especially if you look at some of the articles which have been written 3 or 4 years back, they are not applicable today anymore. So you need to always look at sources which are as up to date as possible, no later than 1 or 2 years. And something that I keenly follow is the budget that is that is announced every year. And I keenly follow what the changes are, and then try to convert it into a format which is easy to understand for everyone, and then explain it to my audience. So number one is the budget, and number two is there'll definitely be a lot of changes which the RBI releases, and there'll also be changes with the SEBI, which is the investment SEBI, which is the regulatory body for the equity market in India. So they also release a lot of new updates and rules. So constantly keeping track of that, and then that's how I keep myself updated and ensure that my audience is getting the most up-to-date information.
So, okay, so then, let's talk about Instagram a little bit, and being a digital content creator and, from a financial perspective. As a digital content creator, do you feel that the kind of money that you earn is enough? I mean, is this something that you could take up full time, let's say, if you wanted to? What is your advice?
Right. So I think it's a long-term game. If you're starting it for the purpose of making money, then you're not going to sustain, because this is a game which requires a lot of consistency. You're not going to see profits from day one. Absolutely not. It could take anywhere from 2 months, or it could take you 2 years to start seeing your first money coming in. But if you are able to sustain through that period of not making any money, then it becomes very lucrative, I would say. For example, in my case, the income that I earned through my content creation side hustle, it is enough to sustain my lifestyle. So I don't necessarily have to do my day job as well. But the reason that I still do both of them, because I enjoy both of them equally. So that's why I continue doing both of them. But to answer your question, it becomes a very lucrative career path if you can sustain through that period when you can't make any money, and after you cross a certain threshold, then brands will be very interested to work with you, because you have already created a very unique bond with a large number of audience, which brands are unable to.
Yeah. And, how long did it take you, let's say, to monetize your content? And what is the usual timeline like, from what you understand, to be able to start making money off of digital content creation?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. So it took me about 2 months to start monetizing.
Wow.
So what happens is, once you cross 10,000 followers, that's when brands come to you, right? So I was fortunate that way. But I would say on an average, it would take anywhere from 1 year to 2 years. You need to be very consistent for at least 1 or 2 years. This is based on the research that I did on how much time it takes to monetize. But I was fortunate.
All right. Awesome. Sharan, this has been a very, very fascinating conversation. We're so glad that you could come on the show and talk to us about finances. If you could just give us one tip before we let you go on how to manage your personal finances the best. How do you manage your personal finances? If you could tell us before we let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is a very important question. So when most people think about how to manage money, they look at the option which gives the best returns. But that is not the right thing to do. You need to first understand what your financial goals are, because at the end of the day, what is the money for? It is for fulfilling your aspirational goals. It could be either to buy a car, go for an education, or buy a home, or to retire early. So these are the goals that you have. So first thing you need to do is list out all these financial goals. And what happens is, if you have a lot of short-term goals, then the assets that you are allowed to invest in will be more towards debt category and not towards equity. But if most of your goals are long-term, then you can move more towards equities. So I would advise all people who are watching this, the first thing you need to do is understand what your financial goals are. And that will help you understand what asset classes to invest in. Once you know what asset classes to invest in, then it becomes an easy process. But first step is understanding how your money should flow into different asset classes. Once you've understood that, you are in the right path forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Sharan, for joining us on NewsX Influencer A-List, and more power to you.
Thank you, Paridhi.
Demystifying the myths surrounding stock markets.
Try to get people started with the stock market, because it's very important to get started with your investments as early as possible.
She's a young achiever with infinite potential.
You can start as early as you want. You can only get a Demat account when you're 18, like in your name, but you can start with your parents' account, right?
NewsX Influencer A-List proudly recognizes Kathleen Kuse Naha for influence in financial management.
Hello and welcome. You're joining us on NewsX Influencer A-List. With us today is yet another finance influencer. Now, when we say finance influencer, we think stocks, we think stock markets, we think insurance. And Kathleen here is 19 years old, And on the internet, she's giving out information on how to manage finances. Caslin, thank you so much for being with us on the show, and welcome to NewsX.
It's a pleasure. I'm very excited to be on here.
All right. So, Caslin, firstly, tell us about your journey, because you're 19 years old. From what I understand from our conversation, you're still pursuing your degree. You're simultaneously working on being a chartered accountant. Tell us a little about yourself, and your social media journey.
Okay, so like I said, I'm doing BCom with CA right now. I'm going to be giving my CA Inter exams this November. And I also have a social media page where I talk about the stock market and try to get people started with the stock market, because it's very important to get started with your investments as early as possible. Social media is something I like doing. Like, I like being in front of a camera. So I had started out with Reels.
Yeah.
So like when I started getting some followers, I was like, might as well give them something valuable, right? Like get them started with something. And then there's also this thing, only 2 to 3% of the Indian population actually invest in the stock market. And I was like, I need to get more people into this, especially the youth, because it's very important. A 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job doesn't really, satisfy all your needs and desires. So as soon as you get started.
Do you invest in stock markets? And if you do, then at what age did you start, investing in stocks?
I started when I was 18. Up until then, I was studying about it, and then paper trading and stuff.
So like for somebody like me, I do not have a finance background whatsoever, right? So if somebody tells me tomorrow start investing in stocks, I don't know where to begin. What would your tip be, as a social media influencer, as a content creator who talks about finance? What would your tip be, to simplify or dumb down finance for people like I?
So see, if you have no knowledge about finance at all, I would say go for index funds or ETFs. Now, what are these index funds? Like, now you know about Nifty, right? It represents the country's economy. That is what Nifty represents. Now, would you expect your country's economy to go down? Like you are always, bullish on your country's economy, right? You always wanted to go up, and you are pretty sure it will go up because we are all working towards it. We are all contributing to it in a way. So what happens is when you invest in an index fund, it is actually copying the index, the returns of the index, right? So it's safer for you, and you know where your money is going. It is like, it is basically like Nifty has this 50 companies list. So this index fund is also investing in those 50 companies in that certain ratio. So you are getting return. You're getting as much return as Nifty is giving on a yearly basis. That is a good way to go for a beginner. And also like ETFs also mirrors the index as well, like Nifty Bs, Bank Bs. Those are some ETFs you can get started with. These are directly traded on the stock market. And also the expense ratio is relatively low. It's easier to get. Like ETFs and index funds are the way to go if you're just getting started and have no idea. Okay. Because you're basically just going with the country's economy and like Nifty. So that is something you can actually trust.
Okay, so I want to know from you. You're 19 years old, right? And when it comes to finance, people usually look for elder people that have more experience, to say the least, in the field. So when you start putting out content, was it a little daunting? Was it? Were you ever scared of giving out, let's say, the wrong advice and getting some kind of backlash on the internet? Because the internet is an unforgiving place, right? At the end of the day.
Right. I was scared, but then I realized like I shouldn't really put out something which I have half knowledge of. What I'm putting out right now is completely related to stock market, and I try to present it in the form of memes, right? So these are basically solely based on my experiences, what I have learned and everything. So I make sure I know the topic entirely before I actually put it out. And plus, I think putting it out in the meme format or in a fun way has actually helped a little. Because and it's not like I'm actually giving out total investment advice or something. I'm just like asking them to at least get started with it. Because people have this perception that the stock market is a gamble, which actually angers me a lot, because it's not. If you know what you're doing, it's not a gamble. Because if you look at it, if you get into anything with half knowledge, it is bound to be a gamble. So make sure you're actually studying about it and have at least know what you're doing, and it will definitely not be a gamble.
So, talking about your social media journey, you said that you've been creating content for 4 months now, and in 4 months to reach staggering 75,000 plus followers is massive. What has it been like, Caslin? When did you start? When did you realize that your account or your channel was picking up? And did you put in some kind of paid promotions to get the word out there, or how did this work? Is this all organic?
Okay, so what happened is I think I started with YouTube. I don't upload anything on YouTube as such right now, but I started with vlogs around in November last year. So, and then I was like, if I have a YouTube account, I need to have an Instagram account too.
Yeah.
So around that time itself, I created an account, but I wasn't really active on that. But then I think around Jan or Feb, I started posting regularly, but then it was not, finance based. It was all entertainment based, something that I like to do. Like as the time passed, I wasn't really serious about this. I was like, dekha jayega kinds. And then I think around mid-March, I actually started gaining traction, like a lot of followers actually.
Did you realize that, it's important to have a niche? And sorry for cutting you off, because you said that eventually you realized that you wanted to delve into finance, more particularly. So
yeah.
Do you feel that having a niche is what has helped you gain the kind of followers that you have?
I guess, and mainly I think loving what I do, right? Because when I started gaining those followers back in March, I realized, I don't really want to give this sort of content out to them, like where they're not exactly getting some value out of it, right? So I wanted to give some value-based content, but in a fun way. So I started with this finance thing, and I think it has helped. Yes, building a niche is always a good thing because your audience knows then what to expect, and then they know what they have come for. So
right. So before we let you go, Caslin, because we have run out of time, I want you to give the people watching this, our viewers, especially those that are younger, the younger audience watching this interview, if you could give them 2 tips on investing in stock markets real quick.
Okay, so like I said, start with index funds and ETFs and study as much as possible. You might think you know nothing or something, but then, once you get started, because when I look back on myself, like last year, I used to know nothing. And now when I look at myself, I'm like, okay, I know something. So just keep going, be consistent. Yeah. That is all that matters. Don't get intimidated by other people. Just get started and you'll be good.
All right. It's been a pleasure having you, Caslin. More power to you and keep shining.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.